Hi, welcome back. This is lecture number 6, The Rise of Fascism. Right, so we have just finished learning that in many countries across Europe, autocratic totalitarian leaders were taking over beginning in the 1920s in places like Russia. Russia went through its own revolution, getting rid of an absolute monarch called a Tsar and replacing that monarch with a communist totalitarian dictator named Stalin. We also learned that a totalitarian ruler is an autocrat and that there are many ways a totalitarian ruler or leader can have total control over their people. So refer to the last lecture, please. All right, well, did you know that a totalitarian leader, they're not just communists like Lenin and Stalin? Oh no, totalitarian rule can happen anywhere, even in places where people hate communism. Today we're going to learn about a type of totalitarian rule called fascism. Okay, say that out loud, fascism. It looks like it should be pronounced fascism because of how it's spelled, but it's the whole sh sound, okay? Fascism. Great, well, fascism is a totalitarian form of rule, and we're going to see this type of leadership in Germany and Italy in the 1930s. Fascist governments are characterized by censorship and government control of the news. Fascist leaders want to make sure that the only news that you get is their version of things. So most likely the government would control all radio and media news outlets. Fascist governments are ruled by a dictator who frequently uses violence and terror to make people obey. Fascist leaders focus on militarism or building up their nation's defense excessively. Leaders in a fascist regime promote something called extreme nationalism. We already know that nationalism is loyalty and pride for one's nation or country. In a fascist regime, people learn to value their country over all others, and they come to believe that their needs in their nation are more important than the needs of other people living elsewhere. Another characteristic of fascism includes blind loyalty to your leader. In a fascist state, people learn to follow their leader without asking questions. People agree to set aside their own rights temporarily. The leader will tell them things like, hey, don't worry, I'm just trying to root out terrorists. I'll give you back your well-deserved rights later, but for the sake of our country, we need to give up some of our rights temporarily for the good of our nation. Finally, fascists promote strict discipline. Fascist regimes stress the importance of regimented and orderly life. There is mass public education where kids will learn from a young age the importance of being part of a certain way of life. Traditional gender roles are maintained in a fascist state, and people who defy these roles in any way are ostracized or outcast. Additionally, fascist states discriminate against any religion or group of people that does not seem to promote or glorify the nation. Fascism was really appealing to people in post-war Germany and Italy. Why? Well, first of all, there were high unemployment rates in both countries due to the Great Depression. There were no jobs in many parts of Germany and Italy. Vibrant leaders like Hitler and Mussolini will promise to make life better for the unemployed, and then they actually followed through. This was extremely appealing to some people. There was also an intense fear in Italy and Germany of communism that many people had. This fear of communism was used by Hitler and Mussolini to gain power. They exploited or played up people's fears about communism. Totalitarian leaders often exploit people's fears in society. Please note, although fascism is a type of totalitarian rule, and although communism as an economic system relies on totalitarian rule in order to make it happen, communist totalitarian governments are not the same as fascist totalitarian regimes. So fascists are not communists. Get it? Fascism is a political movement, while communism is an economic movement. All right, so how are they different? Okay, well, again, I just said fascism is a political movement, communism is an economic movement. Fascists have market economies. The government doesn't make economic decisions. The government does work with businesses and they help to regulate them, but fascists want private businesses for competitive purposes in society. See, fascism is a political system. That's the big difference between them. So that's the main difference. It should be noted that although both Germany and Russia established totalitarian regimes during the 1920s and 1930s, both nations had very different ideologies about the economy and who should lead people. And they didn't get along. Hitler hated communists, and hence the USSR, and Stalin hated fascists, hence He didn't like Germany very much, get it? In Germany, Adolf Hitler will rise to power. As a dictator, he silenced his critics. He built up his military, and he immediately violated the Treaty of Versailles. He offered employment to many people, and he improved the German standard of living. He used education and the media as propaganda tools to spread his fascist ideology. So how did he gain power? Well, after World War I, Kaiser Wilhelm was forced to step down. Germany was a mess. The new government following World War I was called the Weimar Republic. That's spelled Weimar, but it's pronounced Weimar. This was a democratic government, actually. However, it was very unpopular. Problems like inflation and war guilt from World War I made many Germans upset with this government. This government worked closely with countries like Great Britain and France following World War I. The Weimar government agreed to reparations payments to the rest of Europe, and quite frankly, many Germans felt like the war wasn't all their fault, and they felt it was completely unfair that Germany had been blamed for the whole mess. Well, this unhappiness with the Weimar government is going to lead to the rise of the German Fascist Party, or the Nazi Party as it was called. The Germans wanted a leader who would give them jobs and make them proud to be German again. Hitler eventually led the Nazi Party, which stands for National Socialist German Workers' Party. Hitler made people believe that they were a special race who were destined to build a new empire. He gained power in 1933, becoming the German Chancellor, or leader. It should be noted that many people in Germany thought Hitler was an idiot. They found him to be racist and hateful. Only a small percentage of the German population actually belonged to the Nazi Party. Most people at the time looked at the Nazi Party as uneducated thugs. People didn't really take the party seriously. He became chancellor in part because of some suave political maneuvering, and Hitler capitalized on the fact that there were so many political parties in Germany at the time. Quite frankly, many people couldn't believe it when Hitler became chancellor. But once he was named chancellor, many people actually, they made fun of him, calling him a clown. Well, his critics were soon silenced once he created a fascist totalitarian state. See, once he was named chancellor, he passed a number of emergency acts to ensure that he alone had power. It was all very sketchy, but totally legal. He used the loopholes in the democratic process to gain power. In Italy, a fascist totalitarian state was also established. Benito Mussolini became the ruler of Italy. He promised to end unemployment and gain more territory for Italy. He vowed to outlaw rebellions and all threats to fascism. In 1922, using force and terror with his Black Shirt Army, he gained control of Italy. He ended free speech, freedom of religion, and the free press. All political enemies, in other words, anyone who wasn't a fascist, they were killed or jailed. Italians agreed to give up individual rights for the security he promised them. So how did the Nazis in Germany and fascists in Italy rise to power? Well, let's use Germany as an example. First of all, World War I created many German war debts, a loss of German colonies overseas, and an intense desire for revenge on the rest of Europe. Remember Willie, our cafeteria bully? He was blamed for the huge food fight. Yeah, well, he was forced to clean everything up, and he felt bitter about this long after the food fight. Additionally, there was a weak government in Germany after World War I. People doubted the Weimar Republic's ability to rebuild Germany, and people were impatient. There were frequent quarrels or fights amongst the many, many political parties in Germany. People in Germany also desired to have a strong leader in power, and they longed for the days of when the Kaiser ruled. Kaiser Wilhelm had helped to create a strong German identity, and many people wanted that back again. Other contributing factors to the rise of the Nazis in Germany, well, there were massive economic problems there. First off, there was inflation, which I've already told you in previous lectures is when your money isn't worth as much anymore. There was a worldwide depression taking place in the 30s, and the effect of this on Germany was intense. Unemployment was widespread. Under the leadership of Hitler, the Nazi Party is going to use terror and force. The Nazis will give many German people the idea that they are a superior race and that then they will shift blame to the minority groups in society and blame those groups for Germany's problems. Hitler used a lot of propaganda to inspire people to follow his ideology. Hitler encouraged German citizens to donate their money and time to the Nazi Party to help educate German youth to follow their leader, or Führer as he was known. Hitler typically showed himself as the leader of the war machine with the Nazi flag all over the place. He tried to create nationalistic fervor via propaganda and rallies. Okay, finally, we're going to see a totalitarian state emerge far away from Germany and Italy, in Japan. Japan had become extremely aggressive towards other countries following their Meiji era of industrialization and modernization. Although they were led by an emperor at that time named Hirohito, real power belonged to military leaders like General Tojo. Japan actively engaged in militarism in the years leading up to and following World War I. Militarism is the building up of a nation's army or military for imperialistic purposes. If you want to take over another country, you will definitely need a strong military. Japan became militaristic in earnest following World War I because they lost some of their territory overseas, some of their foreign markets for selling their goods, etc., following World War I. There was high unemployment in the country following World War I, lots of poverty among the peasants. Poverty was a huge issue there. Write it down in the blank on your page, please. There were intense feelings of nationalism, and many Japanese people longed to expand their empire. The effects of Japanese imperialism was that Japan became increasingly hostile towards other nations, especially China, who was undergoing its own civil war between the communists and nationalists. Remember from 9th grade? Yeah, we know that China ended up with a communist regime under Mao in 1949, but from 1918 to 1949, China was a fairly unstable place that was prone to attack by other nations, namely Japan, who desired Chinese resources and desired to make an Asia for all Asians, which was an Asia for the Japanese, basically. Japan also withdrew from the League of Nations, and there were many anti-Western feelings in Japan. There was also an end to many democratic freedoms in Japan under the new military regime. There was a renewed practice of traditions in Japan and an idea of increasing honor for their emperor by conquering land and territory for the emperor's empire. We're also going to start to see Japan renewing their expansion and efforts to control parts of China. So it appears that by 1933, Germany, Italy, and Japan all had totalitarian forms of government in place. Fascism in Italy and Germany threatened the peace in Europe, and aggressive militarism in Japan increased tensions throughout Asia. And we're just about to World War II, so thanks for listening. Bye.